Black goo is often depicted in movies, TV shows, music videos, commercials, and video games. It even makes the news from time to time.
Black goo, or something resembling it, is found in the Indian River Lagoon. What is it? And is more on the way. News Channel 5's Megan McRoberts, part of the largest news team on the Treasure Coast, and she joins us live from Jensen Beach. Megan.
Michael, tonight environmental experts are trying to figure out exactly what washed up ashore here on Hutchinson Island over the weekend. A viewer sent us a photo he took on Sunday of what appeared to be a black gooey substance.
Cheryl McKenzie walked outside her Farmington Hills condo only to find her white Lincoln MKS covered in this blackish, bluish, green gook. Covered in this blackish, bluish, green gook, blackish, bluish, green gook, blackish, bluish, green gook that rained down on her neighborhood.
Then I started looking, I said, wow. And I walked up and down the street, and in the street it was covered. I went to each unit, it was covered.
From the driveways and walkways to the windows and roof, Plum Grove Lane is splattered with this stuff. It happened 3 times recently, and no one knows what it is. Yuri Voldman tried to wash it off his SUV.
And I have no idea where it's coming from. And sometimes in the morning, sometimes during the day. I thought maybe, birds flying.
I think that it might be something from one of the airplanes. They might have dumped something out because the airplanes fly kind of low in this area. But we're really concerned. We're concerned that it might be toxic.
So what are they trying to tell us? What is this black mysterious substance?
World's most mysterious substance, black goo. The biggest deposit in the earth is found in Paraguay. It must be more than coincidence that the Bush family has bought acreage of land there to build their villa. And even more freaky is the fact that Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, has bought land to build her villa right next to the Bush's villas in the Paraguay deposit of the black goo area. Very strange indeed. Also, this black goo seems to be living. Black goo is found on Earth, but it also comes onto Earth from outer space. When it's kept in a box, it seems to be asleep. It's silent. It's like a little hamster that's sleeping. You can see it's alive because of the way it's somehow moving. When you have two boxes in the same room, they seem to feel the presence of each other, and they strive to reach each other. If they cannot reach each other, they start shaking in the box, trying to get one to the other, to come close to each other. They're liquid crystals, and they seem to have intelligence. This black goo has been found in the rainwater of Germany. This is black goo crystal extracted from World War II SS black stones. These are the black stones that are very similar to black stones that have been used in pagan rituals, in even the black stone that is found in the Kaaba in Mecca. In the past, these black stones were used by witches, pagans. Human sacrifice was performed on them, infant sacrifice on these black stones. And one such stone, as we said before, is located in the Kaaba in Mecca, where Muslims have pledged to make at least one trip in their lifetime to the Kaaba. The ancient Egyptian priests used to eat monatomic gold, which would bring them into the M state matter and therefore be able to keep their youth. Humans are able to find themselves in M state matter up to 18 years old, and that's when they start aging. We also have reference to monatomic gold in the Old Testament. I believe it's in Genesis. Many a time asked Orthodox priests why the inclusion of monatomic gold, and such passages of monatomic gold were put in the Holy Bible. Moses was very careful to place that in there because he was the person who wrote Genesis. So reading Genesis 2, verse 12, it says, "The gold of that land is exceptionally pure. Aromatic resin and onyx stone are also found there." Onyx is usually black. So another version says, "The gold of that land is good. The bdellium and the onyx stone are there." And again, one verse before that from Genesis 2:11, "The name of the first is Pishon. It flows around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. The bdellium and the onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It flows around the whole land of Cush." So they give importance in the Old Testament. In Genesis, the first book of the Old Testament, Moses tells us of the monatomic gold and the black stone, the onyx. Strange that he gives this information. It's as if he's guiding people there. It's a verbal map as to where they can find this, quote, "gold of that land is good, and bdellium and onyx stone are there." So obviously they're in need of all this, and he's telling them where to go for it. Between the rivers Pishon and Gihon in the land of Cush. Also, black goo from the Deepwater Horizon incident that polluted the beaches. We have to remember that no civilians were allowed to work at those beaches for the cleanup because of the danger involved with collecting this black goo. As a matter of fact, certain people that were working on that area for the cleanup witnessed that they got sick. Some of them had infections on their hands, on their legs. Some of them had to be amputated. Several people said that they could not get rid of the from this black goo, which they believed was tar or oil from Deepwater Horizon, and they believed that it had infected their whole body, their whole circulatory system. Tar or oil, 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 tar or oil.
The British Navy was at war with everybody. They were trying to conquer the world, and to build sea vessels they needed tar, pitch, and turpentine.
Well, there was a vast forest, 90 million acres of virgin longleaf pine. The sap flow was just amazing. All that resin flows, of course, throughout the tree. It sticks to things and it seals water. The whole purpose of the tar was to waterproof ships.
You can read about this in a book, but nobody's actually seen this for close to 100 years. This is something that people did for 200 years in this country, every single day. And the resin would come out to the outsides of this tree. After a couple years, this wood on the outside of this tree would be totally saturated with resin like this right here. November cold months, each man had to cut 100 of these holes in the base of a tree just to catch the resin that's coming down in the spring. And each week you dipped out the resin and you started again, catch you a new streak. But this is what actually led to the demise of all the longleaf pine in this area. But this is what actually led to the demise of all the longleaf pine in this area.
I'm making tar. It'll come out the end of the pipe there as tar. It should start to drip pretty soon. This here is good fat lotto right here. dark in color, resin still in it. That will give you a great abundance of tar. Okay, it's starting to drip out now. It fascinated me by what our forefathers had done. It's learning. It's learning what they did and how they produced these products. They were actually very, very smart, very intelligent. Yeah, you get a good flow going out of there now. That is tar.
And tar was used by England to coat the sails, the ropes, the riggings, to keep them from rotting. They painted it on with a paintbrush. If you take this and boil it, then you boil it down and boil the moisture out of it and make pitch. And pitch is what England used and drove it in the sides of the ship between the cracks.
You got a good flow going now.
And the tar would be all around the catch hole coming out of these mounds.
The tar that comes from the mounds, they would boil this, boil the moisture off, and it would become pitch, you know, real sticky. They would add horse manure. It would bond it together. It would hold it, strengthen it. Yeah, horse manure. Pitch starts this tar.
Yeah, the pitch was a thicker substance which they would heat up to get pliable, so they could actually paint it on the between the cracks of the boards and waterproof the ships that way.
I'm sealing off the top of the steel now. Basically what you're doing when you pour the resin into the steel, you heat it in order to get the resin to boil off in order to make the turpentine. Turpentine is used for numerous things, medicine. They use it in paint thinner. England needed us a lot in order for our products that we had here.
What we have is a miniature steel, but the first thing we're going to do is load the resin from the pine trees into the steel. Now when this resin starts cooking, it's going to turn into a liquid. Then what you have left over in here is called rosin. This is a byproduct of turpentine. The rosin was not considered any good for anything. They dumped it in rivers and streams, and later on they came along and mined it back out because they'd started using it in soap. In fact, growing up, when we killed hogs, we threw some of this in the hog vat and it helped the hair come off of the hog. Rosin up your bow.
They ran out of trees. They ran out of trees. They ran out of trees.
Because they seemingly were endless in supply, they never did bother to go back and replant any of them. Never did bother to go back and replant any of them. They never did bother to go back and replant any of them. So they eventually just died out.
The consequence was the work dried up and people left.
Hi everybody, today is May 29th, 2015. It's Friday evening and I'm home after a trip to Larch Mountain today. And this is Mount Hood. I'm standing at the very top of the caldera, and of course you could see that it's completely chemtrailed. There's no blue anywhere. But after basically being frustrated by looking at the sky, I went down into the forest, and I was absolutely shocked to discover that the forest is in really bad shape. One of the things that really shocked the heck out of me is that the trees in the forest are exuding this black goo. I've never seen this in any tree before. Every one of these trees that are exuding this black stuff has a crack down the center of the tree. And this is Mount Hood, by the way, guys. So let's take a peek right here. This is the first tree that we came upon, and as you can see, at first we thought that this tree had been struck by lightning because it was black. But the thing is, there was a lot of moisture on the tree trunk, so it could not possibly have been from a lightning strike. But when you look at it, it's all wet. It's totally wet. And we didn't think about it when we were looking at it at the time, but it's all of these trees in the woods, like this tree. This one is also cracked. I mean, you can see it starts at the ground here and it moves up. Here's another one. This one is also split down the center, and this also has black goo coming out of the bark. I was just shocked. And where we were located was right by a campground, but as we went away from the campground, you could see that the forest had completely died. I mean, you heard no birds, there were no animals, you saw not a squirrel anywhere. And usually you would see squirrels, hear chickadees, hear crows, you'd hear something out in the woods, and there was absolutely nothing out there making noise. It was silent. I mean, this Mount Hood National Forest is silent. But as I said before, there are cracks in these trees. This one hasn't started to exude any black goo yet. But this one right here, you can see it. I mean, look at that. And this stuff is just coming out of the tree. I've never seen that before. This tree as well, they're cracking. This right up the center of the tree. We noticed this in all of the trees that we were passing. It's just unbelievable. This is the black goo that we took off of the tree. As you can see, it's wet, it's really nasty, and the tree is just literally dying. It's unhealthy, and I was just really shocked to see it. And there's that black crud that he took off of the tree. Right here, this is the beginning of the tree cracking. You can see the crack and the black stuff just right up the center. Look at that. It's right up the center of this tree. And there is black stuff. I've never seen it before, and I really hope that anybody else who has been in the woods lately has noticed this and might have an explanation as to why the trees are cracking right up the center and are exuding this black stuff. This is not normal. I suspect that it has a lot to do with, I'm wondering, because I do know what is supposed to happen according to biblical prophecy, that America will burn. According to biblical prophecy, that America will burn. According to biblical prophecy, that America will burn. And I'm wondering if they are not preparing our forests to burn anybody who is inside the forests. It's a thought. It's something that crossed my mind several times before. So I'm just throwing it out there, not saying that this is what they're preparing to do, but I find it scary and disheartening to see the woods just dying. This is deeper into the woods, far away from the camp. As you can see, there is absolutely little to no vegetation, and this is why we are not hearing any animals in the woods. Everything in here has died. And I'm astounded. I'm just kind of at a loss as to what that black stuff is, but it is wherever we walked. I don't know. According to biblical prophecy that America will burn, according to biblical prophecy that America will burn, according to biblical prophecy that America will burn.
Researchers say that a devastating tree disease in California might be impossible to stop. According to findings published May 2nd in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, a water mold pathogen in California forests has led to a phenomenon known as sudden oak death. Since 1995, millions of acres of coastal California forests have been affected, though not all species are vulnerable. Researchers from Cambridge University, North Carolina University, and the University of California now believe that the spread of the disease could be impossible to stop. A possible solution would require the removal of over 200 square kilometers of infected trees each year, costing $100 million annually. But experts believe this would make little impact on the spread of the disease.
In many coast live oaks, the first visible symptom of infection is bleeding through the bark surface. The liquid that oozes from the bark is generally thick and dark reddish-brown to black. In some trees, bleeding is extensive. The appearance can change over time as the ooze dries up and is washed away by rain, often leaving dark stains on the bark. Let's look at an example. We began observing this tree in 2000. In 2006, we noticed bleeding on the trunk of this tree for the first time. Let's look closely at the area in the red circle. When we chip away the outer bark near the bleeding, you can see the canker formed by the pathogen in the phloem of the tree. The canker is the area killed by the pathogen and is visible on the outside but in the area between the arrows. Let's follow what happens to this tree over time, starting when we first noticed the canker. The canker continued to expand, and as is typical among trees with sudden oak death, the older part of the canker was attacked by the sap-rotting fungus Annulohypoxylon thorsianum and several different species of ambrosia beetles. 3 years after infection, the entire trunk is girdled by cankers and the canopy is dead. By 5 years after initial infection, this dead tree is still standing. The tree has already been dead for a year at the time this picture was taken. The tree in the background is also dead.
Every year in the Bay Area, hundreds of oak trees are destroyed by a disease that is so quick and deadly, it is known simply as sudden oak death. This plague has killed so many trees that vegetation experts at Point Reyes National Seashore are concerned about what sudden oak death may mean for California's future.
When considering the possible effects of sudden oak death here at Point Reyes National Seashore, you need to really picture what's going on in the environment. Here you've got oaks that are being lost in the understory. These oaks produce acorns that are really important to the dusky-footed wood rat as a food source. And unfortunately, these dusky-footed wood rats are a primary prey source for the spotted owl. Not only that, these trees are starting to die and fall down and build up fuel in the understory of both redwood and Douglas fir forests. These trees are starting to die and fall down and build up fuel in the understory of both redwood and Douglas fir forests. These trees are starting to die and fall down and build up fuel in the understory of both redwood and Douglas fir forests. And we may be seeing some of the effects of sudden oak death recently in the Big Sur fires, where there may have been an abnormal increase in fuel loading as a result of this disease. An abnormal increase in fuel loading as a result of this disease. An abnormal increase in fuel loading as a result of this disease. An abnormal increase in fuel loading as a result of this disease. Also attacking oaks in the form of a bark canker. And what's happening is that the canker is actually spreading throughout the cambial layer, which is the living tissue on the outside of the tree. And unfortunately, if that disease continues around the entire trunk of the tree, it will girdle it and eventually kill the entire tree. Sudden oak death disease was first detected in the 1990s in Marin County, and unfortunately that continued to spread pretty dramatically and rapidly throughout the area. And we're assuming that redwoods are actually the foliar host for that disease. And we're assuming that redwoods are actually the foliar host for that disease. Redwoods are actually the foliar host for that disease.
The Bohemian Club was established in 1872 in San Francisco as an exclusive club for political and intellectual figures who wanted to spend some time each year relaxing and interacting in a non-business environment. In other words, a playground for the elite. They began camping at the present site of what's known today as Bohemian Grove, 2,437 acres of private redwood forest. 2,437 acres of private redwood forest.
And we're assuming that redwoods are actually the foliar host for that disease.
Okay, we're back. It's 8 minutes after the hour, and we're going to get deep inside the Illuminati, the family, the order. We have a guest that was involved with this group, born into it for over 30 years, and her name is Svali. Svali, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
So you reach the age of 12, and then you're told by your parents you're going to an induction ceremony in the Vatican. Can you tell us how that happened and what occurred at that ceremony when you went there?
Okay, this isn't easy to talk about, as you know. When I was 12, I was flown over to Germany, and I was at, I'll call him the German father's house over there, and there was some preparation for a few days beforehand, and I was told that there would be a very important ceremony, and it was considered a sealing ceremony at that point. And basically, I was told a little bit about what I was expected to do during the ceremony. You know, when we got there, we went to the Vatican. There's underneath the Vatican, there's a large room that I described to you when we talked before. It has 13 catacomb chambers leading into it with and what they do is they, as you go down these steps into the room, you can see that it's almost circular, and so they're all around it, and they bring out the mummies from the catacombs, and they set them beside each one, and they say that the spirits of the fathers watching over the ceremony. And during the ceremony, there was a large table in the center of the room. It was on top of a huge golden pentagram, and they had a ceremony there. You know, they.
Okay, now how many other children were with you being inducted into the family or the order, as they call it?
There were 2 other children at that point, and but there were several adults too.
Okay.
See, the church also brings in adults to swear their allegiance too. Just so you know, I was told, and I don't know if this is true, but if you want to rise to a certain position within the Catholic Church hierarchy, you do have to go through that ceremony as well.
Okay, so you're down in this room with your parents weren't present.
No. The German father and the French father were. Yeah.
Okay, and at that point, tell our listeners what you witnessed.
Well, there was a table. It looked like dark glass in the center of the room. I mean, it was made of stone, but it was very shiny and dark and black. It was made of stone, but it was very shiny and dark and black. It was made of stone, but it was very shiny and dark and black. And it may have been something like obsidian or onyx. I'm not sure. You know, I'd have to. That's the only time I've seen stone like that. And it may have been something like obsidian or onyx. I'm not sure. You know, I'd have to. That's the only time I've seen stone like that.
These are the black stones that are very similar to black stones that have been used in pagan rituals, in even the black stone that is found in the Kaaba in Mecca. In the past, these black stones were used by witches, pagans. Human sacrifice was performed on them. Human sacrifice was performed on them. Infant sacrifice on these black stones. Infant sacrifice on these black stones. And one such stone, as we said before, is located in the Kaaba. In verse 12, it says, "The gold of that land is exceptionally pure. Aromatic resin and onyx stone are also found there." Onyx is usually black. And onyx stone are also found there. Onyx is usually black. And onyx stone are also found there. Onyx is usually black.
And it had, like, around the corners, it had, like, these gold, I guess, channels that you know, to collect fluids. And little boy was placed in the center of the table and drugged. I think he was drugged because he was very quiet. He didn't move or say anything during the ceremony.
This was a little 3 or 4-year-old boy.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
And then they continued to, go ahead, they continued to do a child sacrifice.
Yes,
right in front of you.
They did. Yes. Yeah, I told you about that afterwards, the man in scarlet, he had a huge golden ring on his hand, and he came over to the center of the room, and he had each of the people that were swearing that day. I had to go forward and kneel before him and kiss his ring and swear my allegiance to the new order, to the new world order, until my death.
In the early 20th century, an American explorer by the name of Edward Thompson dredged a sacred cenote, which is a natural well found near the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. In it, he found a 14-foot layer of blue precipitate, a 14-foot layer of blue precipitate, a 14-foot layer of blue precipitate, bowls, artifacts, and 127 skeletons. How cool is that? But why are all these artifacts and bodies in a well? And how do you create 14 feet of blue sediment that is blue for centuries now? This vibrant blue color is known as Mayan blue. It's found on pottery, codices, palace murals, and other artifacts made by Mayan peoples centuries ago. This color held an extremely strong significance for these agricultural peoples, as it was the color of Chak, the rain god, and of human sacrifice. When the climate was dry and the skies were cloudless, much like the color Mayan blue, human sacrifices may have been painted in this color and sacrificed in hopes of rain. However, more often than human sacrifices were artifacts and pottery painted in the same color and sacrificed for the same purposes. So that would explain the contents of the well. But perhaps one of the most peculiar things is that this pigment is unusually durable, remaining vibrant after other colors have long faded away in one of the world's most harshest climates. For a long time, its chemical stability was quite a mystery. How is it able to remain virtually impervious to age, acid, weather, and even some of the world's modern solvents? Needless to say, if you have 14 feet of this pigment sitting at the bottom of your sacred well, it must have been pretty darn important.
There's very little pigment remaining on these reliefs, and we're trying to track down a particular pigment, which is called Egyptian blue. It's a very important pigment that was used throughout antiquity, and it has very special optical properties that we're exploiting in this technique, which is called visible induced infrared luminescence.
These reliefs would have stood in the palace of the king. The larger goal of the project is to reconstruct the color of these palatial spaces. Now, these reliefs would have stood underneath wall paintings. The ceilings would have been painted, the columns would have been painted, the floor would have been painted. Try to imagine what these palatial spaces look like in color, because color is an important cultural signifier.
These Assyrian reliefs were discovered around 1840 by the British, and in fact at the time of the excavations it was not unusual to have an artist as part of the team and record and document through drawings and watercolors what was found and an interpretation of the palace at that time. And in fact we have at Yale collections of these drawings and watercolors, which makes it even a richer resource.
A scientist at the British Museum, Giovanni Verri, he pioneered visible induced infrared luminescence as a tool to spatially map the remaining pigment grains of Egyptian blue on these reliefs. So we can zoom in on a detail, so we can focus all the light we have on the area, and in this case more is more. The more light you have, the more signal you get, and the more easily the Egyptian blue is detected. The effect is very, very strong, so even single grains of Egyptian blue pigment we can detect with this technique. The Egyptian blue will show up as bright white, while everything else will be more or less dark in the image.
Blue was a rare color in ancient times in general, compared to, let's say, red or yellow pigments. So the Assyrians actually were very interested in trying to manipulate pigments and create blue. And it became a prestige color for the Assyrians, and especially with the prestige symbols in the Assyrian landscape, which were the palaces.
I find it quite amazing that there are any traces of pigments on these ancient reliefs, considering that they're nearly 3,000 years old. I find it quite amazing that there are any traces of pigments on these ancient reliefs, considering that they're nearly 3,000 years old. I find it quite amazing that there are any traces of pigments on these ancient reliefs, considering that they're nearly 3,000 years old. And at the time of excavation, it was not uncommon for archaeologists to actually scrape off polychromy in order to better read the inscriptions and the carving. So the fact that we have some pigment remaining that you can see with the naked eye is terrific, but the fact that we now have a new technique for looking at traces of Egyptian blue provides us with even more information, and we actually can kind of rediscover what the polychromy would have looked like in antiquity.
Our findings have confirmed some of the things that I've read about. The beard of the figure standing behind me has blue, and a blue beard is sort of a metaphor in the ancient world because the blue had a luminescent quality to it, and since beards were associated with masculinity and virility, it makes perfect sense that the king would have a bluish black beard.
Look into the United States, we have the Bush family in power. Even if it's not called Bush, there's Bush inside. And they're all members of Skull and Bones. Sounds pretty black magic. If you look how these people are interconnected, the next topic is going to be black goo. And there's one big black goo deposit in Paraguay. And there's one village next to this black goo deposit. And the Bush family has her big villa escape territories. When they are chucked out of the United States, they're going to be down there, living in this little village in Paraguay. And a friend of mine went down there to get samples of this black goo from Paraguay. And he realized that Angela Merkel had her villa next door. Yeah? And this black goo has to do something with the communication with demons. This is in the black magic tradition. These black goo schists were used to communicate with the demons. So this all interconnects on political, scientific, and the level of mythology. We can access black goo also from the little pictures from the microscope. This is German rain. And if you want to know what this liquid does, you can have a look at it in the lab. When you have bigger amounts of it, it looks like this. It's a liquid crystal. This liquid is self-organizing physically. And this, at the moment, is sleeping. It's not aware of being observed, it's quiet. Sometimes when it doesn't like to be observed, it might jump out of the pot straight into your face. If you have two of those in one room, get them 5 meters close to each other, they stare at each other, then they decide that they want to be united. And then they start to pull. It's like magnetism, but it's intelligent. And when they realize that you hold them within the vessel and they cannot escape, they get angry and start to shake the vessel and try to break through the wall. Because they know once they are through, they can flow over the ground and unite to a bigger unit. This is something you can just observe in the lab. And especially this liquid was extracted from those black stones. This is World War II leftovers. We found them in an underground facility in Bavaria, 1/2 ton of it. So we can imagine that the SS processed quite a bit of this. And I guess that the guys found also the technology to extract the oil from it. Must have been there in written form because they did it in the lab successfully. If you look at those stones, you have a brief history of things reported out of former times. You have, if you look at H.P. Lovecraft, the descriptions of the black magic communities in Eastern Europe, they had kind of sculptures out of this black oil schist. And once a year they went there slaughtering little babies to get the demons out of the stone, sacrificing little children to communicate and get the service from the demons. This is one thing mentioned. If you go back in history, you find them in the Kaaba in Mecca, the same form of phallus-shaped structure that is described in Vedic script as Shiva's lingam, that is described in this Lovecraft script. A fragment of it is part of a central part of the Kaaba in Mecca, and every Muslim in the world is asked to go there once in his life and to kiss this stone. And it is not easy to understand the overall concept, because when you start to deal with black goo, the first thing you need to discover before anything makes sense is that there are two different qualities. We have liquid black goo. It is basically, it has been found on a southern Falkland island, Tula Island. And this is what the war with Argentina was about, accessing this black goo. We have this type of earth black goo in the Gulf of Mexico. This was what the Deepwater Horizon catastrophe was all about. Somebody was shooting a torpedo at the facility, destroying the attempt to get the black goo out of Mother Earth. And we had, I think, eight military submarines getting close to World War III, trying to capture some of that oil after Deepwater Horizon was destroyed. And no single civilian was allowed to go to the beaches to remove the oil. And it was just military personnel with special equipment and fully shielded against the influence of this substance. So this is one quality that comes from Mother Earth. And then you have a second quality that is found in connection with meteorite sites. If you look at the thing in Paraguay, you can exactly see by the form the stones are broken in the environment that was an impact of a meteorite. If you look into the Arabic mythology, they say the thing in the Kaaba in Mecca is a fragment of a meteorite. And this is now not against Muslims. If you look into the Peter's Dome in Rome, you have a big piece of this stone under the Peter's Dome. And if you analyze all the churches built in Middle Ages in Europe, every altar has a black altar stone. And what you feel when you enter a church is not the love of God. It is more like a cold fear. Yeah? This is the resonance transmitted by the structure of the church, fed by this black stone in the central point. Now, what we need to realize is that there are two qualities. One quality is coming from inner earth, and one quality is coming from outer space. And they feel completely different. The Falkland black goo is called xanthan and oil, because it has full empathy. If you're getting close to this oil, you're coming in a state of mind that is full of love and empathy. If you come into the vicinity of the meteorite black goo, your heart chakra dwindles to nothing, and you become an empathy-free asshole. After my first contact with the stones, I was this close from killing the hotel director, because she complained that I took a shower, although I had to sleep outside. They didn't have any rooms left, so I slept in the car, was dead frozen in the morning, and took a shower in a room of a friend who had the last room that was available. And she just complained that I took a shower without asking for permission. I was really close to killing her. This is what these stones do with people as long as they're unconscious. Now we need to understand, the second thing we need to understand is what is the function of the black goo. And to understand the function, you look at the chemistry. It is a mineral oil dotted with high amounts of alchemistic gold and iridium. It is a mineral oil dotted with high amounts of alchemistic gold and iridium. It is a mineral oil dotted with high amounts of alchemistic gold and iridium, which is precious metals in the M state. Precious metals in the M state, which is, it's not really explored. Some people say it's a type of antimatter that is far enough out of our reality to avoid a collision between matter and antimatter. Some people connect it with superconductive qualities. Some people connect it with superconductive qualities. Superconductive qualities. What we know is that gold and iridium in this state of matter is a very important component of biology. If you look at in DNA, you're kind of forming hollow spaces in the spiral, and you can fit these monoatomic precious metals exactly into the open space. And they kind of act as a biophoton attractor. The DNA itself is capturing the field energy, storing it and resending it out. But the gold and the iridium are attracting the photon onto the spot. So this is basically why we get old. The body is capable of producing M-state matter until we are 18 years old, and then we are losing it. And when the matter is gone, the M-state matter is gone out of our system, we disconnect from the morphic field, and we lose our shape and get old. This is why the Egyptian priests fed themselves with these M-state matter, because this function was out of work. So basically there is a kind of fractal similarity between the function on light level of a human being and the function of the black goo within the earth or wherever it is, in a way that we are divided, we live in duality, we are single individuals that are only a little bit connected, interconnected with talk and telepathy sometimes, and with a beautiful smile one might receive, and we are kind of coming and going in generations. But the way we are processing light is actually the same as the black goo is processing light, creating this funny type of quantum magnetism. The way we are processing light is actually the same as the black goo is processing light. The way we are processing light is actually the same as the black goo is processing light. The way we are processing light is actually the same as the black goo is processing light, creating this funny type of quantum magnetism. This is a light effect. So I came to the, let's call it a theory because I cannot prove it, that basically life is first created within a planet when water and CO2 is forming, this type of black goo oil in transmutation processes. We had this process in the lab. We can replicate it. This is why I'm pretty sure with this part, that this is initially formed out of water and carbon dioxide by vortical motions, because we can do it in the lab. And then this type of black goo at a certain point is exiting the Earth, coming into the oceans. This is what you call a black smoker on the ground of the ocean. And this is where the geologists say there was the place where the first life was formed. Because of the repetitive light patterns start to modify with this oil. And the first simple life forms can be built that develop generations and individuals. Like a mass of oil can divide into 2 drops. This is a process of individualization. But the thing is that the light process is happening on a scalar level. So it doesn't distance does not matter. We can penetrate matter without interacting. So what this created, this is my theory, is that basically the entire biology on top, in the biosphere, on top of the planet, is interconnected with the black goo of the planet in a kind of mirror function. Everything we think, everything we feel, everything that is processed within the light body of a human is sent down there, and we have a holofractal, immortal being in the center of the earth that knows everything one can know, remembers everything that ever happened. And this might be the thing that is called the Akasha Chronicle. And this is what is giving the entire biosphere instinct. And the people who interact with this entity, they say it is a motherly creature. She has all aspects of a motherly creature. I observed this many times because when you start dealing with a black goo, you need either to commit suicide or to connect with her. So we have many people who have a straight connection to this being within the planet. And it's funny how she sometimes reacts. Like when somebody has the first contact with her, completely excited, she says, "What do you want?" And then the guy says, oh, I wanted to see, I wanted to meet, what do you want? And then he doesn't know what, he has no question and no target. And she says, sorry, I'm busy. Yeah, come back when you want, when you know what you want from me. Yeah, this is her. She's loving, but she's very straight. And
Okay, today we're just going to go over a little bit of melanin and how melanin is seen scientifically. We all know how important melanin is, because if it wasn't important, your adversary would not go through so many artificial measures to achieve what you have naturally. Ours come naturally from the Most High. He made us, Black people, in his image. So if we're melanated, he's melanated. And the universe is melanated. We're not only earthly beings, we are really people of the entire universe, because as you know, they find what's called dark matter in the universe. Okay, so that tells you how important melanin is. When I was growing up, I remember sitting in the doctor's office, and there was an article on astronauts, and they were talking about the difference between how when they come back from space travel, how long it takes Caucasoid astronauts to bounce back when they come back to the Earth, opposed to Black people that were astronauts. It took them little to no time to bounce back, and it took their Caucasoid counterparts about triple the time for them to bounce back and get back into society after space travel. And it's because of the melanated bodies are just more in tune with not only this earth, but the entire universe. And don't you know, our melanin also protects us from getting a lot of the same birth defects that you see in the Caucasoids. It prevents us from getting a lot of the degenerated diseases that you see them getting. And also try to get out every day and let that sun just have your body to shine on. Just do it, because this is how we keep that vitamin D up in our bodies. If you can't make it out, stand in a window in your house where you can feel that sun hitting on you. That's a really important thing, that we continue to do that. Our ancestors spent a lot of time in the sun. And, you know, being that we have lived such an unnatural life in America, we have gotten away from a lot of our traditions. So if you can get out there, stand in your backyard or out front when that sun is glaring down, and just let that sun have a crack at you, because it's a good thing for us. All right, it's a very good thing. Not only does it make us stronger as a people, look at everything your adversary do. See, they can't duplicate you. And this is why they get upset, that they can't be us, because they can't duplicate the physical traits given to us by the Most High. See, they can't crack a genetic code and then become melanated people. Everything they do to duplicate us is done through artificial means. They have to run to a plastic surgeon if they want any of the physical enhancements done to their bodies. All right. Also, melanin is valuable whether we are dead or alive. Now, we already know about organ harvesting. Not only is melanin external, it's also internally on all of our organs, including our brains. And what does your adversary want? They want your melanated skin. They want your melanated organs. And they want everything on your body because they know it's way more valuable than harvesting anything from them. Even they know where the most powerful organs are, where the most powerful skin is. Now, whenever they want melanin, they have to go again to their artificial means of putting on their, oils. They have tanning oils. They have injections and pills and stuff of that nature. And those things are only a temporary, y'all, means of achieving melanin. If you took them away from those products, they're going to go right back to their pale selves because it's artificial. They can only achieve it artificially, and it's temporary, where ours is for a lifetime. Okay, it never goes away, and that's a beautiful thing. And I thank the Most High every day when I look in the mirror and can see my melanated skin. And you should feel that same way too. Don't ever trade up your melanated skin for skin bleaching and stripping out what the Most High has given you. They may not admit it openly, but they wish they could have your melanin. They wish they could be you without taking on all of the social negativity of being Black people. They really understand a lot about our melanin. But one thing they can't do, they can't achieve our melanin permanently. They never could master that. And that just should go to tell you how complex our melanin really is. It's not one of those simple things to duplicate. The Most High made it so complex, your enemy can't duplicate it. He can't duplicate it at all. But they still love our melanin and studied our melanin from the 1600s all the way up to today. They have never stopped studying our melanin. Not once. Ladies and gentlemen, not once. But they studied it enough to know it is the thing to have. And this is why it's being robbed from our people in death. They know how important it really is.
Melanin's role is, in fact, even being rethought in medicine that, is it really something that just absorbs sunlight, or does melanin have a role in the immune system in the body? And is it really more of an antimicrobial kind of defense against bacteria? Because melanin is found throughout all the animal and vegetable kingdom. And melanin is the very thing that you have in your hair and in your skin that gives you the color. Whether you're more red, whether you're more brown, whether you're tan, whether you're not, is because the melanin produced by your skin in the parts of the cell called melanocytes, or the pigment of your skin. And some people who have a condition called vitiligo, where their skin looks blotchy and they have white patches, they don't make this pigment. When you're exposed to ultraviolet radiation, you make more of it. Now, melanin is what gives chaga its dark color. That's what's so rich in this mushroom compared to the other mushrooms. And what they found in Russia, it protects genes and it actually repairs broken DNA. Isn't that wonderful? Something breaks down because you're exposed to chemicals or radiation. Think of the people of Japan right now in 2011 who are suffering from huge amounts of radiation. What could we do to help them repair their, prevent cancer developing? Well, you need a DNA repairer, and that's what melanin does. You know, just think what you can tell people who have families over there and so on. So this is a complex molecule. It's found in the brain. It's found in your adrenal glands. It's a powerful free radical scavenger. In other words, it helps the body prevent this oxidation. So it's an antioxidant. And I believe this is what makes chaga, among other things, one of the more special mushrooms that are out there. You know, there are these polyphenolic, chromogenic, human-like complexes present in chaga. In other words, it's the dark stuff. The dark stuff, you know, there are these polyphenolic, chromogenic, human-like complexes present in chaga. In other words, it's the dark stuff. The dark stuff, it's the dark stuff. The dark stuff, the black, brown stuff in chaga, what makes everything look so dark, which just, you know, put it on your skin and it looks a little darker, but somehow it improves in things, as we'll talk about in a minute. That's what's in chaga. And they studied this, Babatskaya studied this in 2002, studied this melanin complex, and says it protects the genes in your body. I got really interested also in light. Now, the visible light in the electromagnetic spectrum is only a small part, and it's the colors from, you know, the deep reds to the purples. But in this very narrow band, below that there is infrared or warmth, infrared light or warmth, microwaves that we use for communication nowadays with our cell phones and Wi-Fi and so on. Radio waves are even longer. And then up here are what's ionizing radiation that breaks down things like ultraviolet light, which is faster in frequency, X-rays and gamma rays like we get from atomic reactors and so forth. So here's another way of seeing it. Here's the electromagnetic spectrum. Visible light that your eyes respond to and your skin responds to is a narrow part of the spectrum, you know, here. Now, when you look at absorption curves in the test tube of melanin, this is what we're talking about. You can see in the blue part of the spectrum over here, the short wavelengths, which is higher energy, melanin has a lot of absorption, and it falls off a little bit, but it's in the same region that our body absorbs also light in forms of hemoglobin when you oxygenate your blood. It's also in that same region. And when you deoxygenate your blood, when the cells take the oxygen up, then you get the bluer blood, which is venous blood. And it's in the same region where melanin absorbs it. Has a very broad absorption of energy. Okay? It absorbs light and warmth very, very effectively, and it modulates something in the body. And melanin, you can think of, is very analogous to the chlorophyll. That's the green stuff in plants. What makes the plants green? Chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the same molecule as hemoglobin that's in your blood, except hemoglobin has iron in the center and chlorophyll has magnesium in the center. It's like liquid green blood, okay? Now, melanin has the same kind of ring structures and so on, and it makes very complex structures, and not all melanins are the same, as we'll talk about in a minute. In fact, there's somebody even studying that and wondering whether energy is directly absorbed from the melanin in your skin and transformed into energy in your body. Okay? And they even think about could in the future, and they're developing this now, they're taking melanin and making batteries out of them that store energy from the sunlight directly. It might, in fact, become a future source of how we're going to generate energy. Now, let's get back with that little bit of physics background. Let's talk about melanin inside chaga and melanin inside the body. So it absorbs thousands of times more electromagnetic radiation actually than chlorophyll does. And chlorophyll is what we need to make proteins and sugars, especially sugars in the body. It exists in many other tissues, as I mentioned. It's actually a very important molecule in any woman who's having a baby because the fetus has all this melanin in it, as I'll show you. Okay? And it's thought to be, by some people, a master molecule that actually steers how the body communicates. For example, Frank Barr, a scientist, wrote a whole article, a whole issue of a journal called Medical Hypothesis saying, you know, melanin is such a special molecule and it's found in the babies. It may have a major role in steering things in the body, in the whole regulatory system. Melanin's role in embryological organization, that's in the baby's organization, and tissue repair and tissue regeneration may be connected to the major role that it plays to balance the body, that's called homeostasis, in the autonomic, neuroendocrine, and immunological system. So in other words, melanin may play a much bigger role than just absorbing all this radiation. And when you get it into your body, it actually has a major effect on your immune system. Here's a picture of a baby at 35 days of pregnancy. And this is the eye of an embryo inside a mother. It's a very tiny little thing. Notice that the eye is pure melanin. That's an amazing picture, isn't it? To see all this melanin is inside, and when the embryo first forms, there is what's called the dark streak. It's all melanin. Okay, here's an example of a plant. It's an eggplant that has melanin in it and a genetically changed one that is no melanin in it. Notice the size of the two difference. I mean, this is an indirect indication that melanin, you know, directly can transduce energy in the vegetable kingdom. Now, the body is a living matrix, and you really want to get this because this is kind of part of the operating system of your body, you know. And I know that as we're talking about it, you really have to strain a little bit to stay with me, but I think it'll make some sense here. The body is actually a communication system where everything is connected to everything else, and it works through light. It works through light. It's called biophotons. And in this communication system, cells have connections to other cells called integrins, and electrons and light flows between cells. So it's like a supercomputer. Your body is like a supercomputer, and the skin is connected to every other part of the body. Kind of like a spider web, where everything, when you tug on one part of the spider web, it connects to everything else. And so these cells connect to the connective tissue, which the skin is part of, and it all works like semiconductors. Now, semiconductors, like computer chips, are made out of silicon. These are living semiconductors. Your body is made out of this complex hyper supercomputer that figures everything out. And this is what energy medicine is all about. And when you put chemicals or drugs or lotions or pesticides or mercury from dental fillings that are leaking into your body, then this matrix gets upset. This matrix does not function. The energy doesn't communicate well. And this is where chaga is, I believe, very useful because it helps you detoxify from all of this. Now, here's another form of radiation that's now in our environment. It's called, this is from 1990 to 2007. This is the exponential rise of cell phone use in the United States. This is the increase in 2000 to 2010 of radiation in the environment. This is what we're living in. Here's an example. I just brought one of my little, this is a meter that measures the microwave in this room that you're sitting in. Okay, this is measuring that. You can actually hear, you know, the wireless. I can point it exactly where the most radiation is coming from. These are the communications. That is your Wi-Fi that's in this hotel. This is what people are living in nowadays, you know. In this, we don't know it because you don't feel it, you don't have a sense for it. You need a machine, or in this case, a microwave detector, you know, so you can see it. So I'm mentioning this is because we are changing as a species. And everybody says, well, they're not affecting anything. But we have shown studies, many scientific studies, that it causes DNA breakages, and the body generally repairs this DNA. But if you have chaga on your skin, I believe, or in your body, it helps repair these DNA breakages more. So just that reason alone, I think, as prevention, it's a useful product to have. Does that make some sense to you?
Yes.
Yeah. Because you really, this is what we're living in, and we're kind of drowning in this microwave without even knowing it, because we don't see it like light, or we don't hear it like sound. We don't have a sense for it. So melanin has a high antitoxic potential and helps enzymatic processes. It's a non-specific protective agent. It helps against mutation. It's capable of interacting with other chemicals called xenobiotics that cause oxidation, like heavy metals and other things. The body gets rid of them. It's one of the biggest things. And it has a photo and radioprotective activity. In fact, animals fed chaga, as I'll show you in a minute, live longer when you irradiate them with gamma rays. Those really high-intensity rays that come from atomic bombs and from nuclear reactors. They live a lot longer when they take chaga. They've done studies in animals. Here, 305 days versus the control group died in 186 days. Now, I'm not suggesting any of us get exposed to gamma rays or whatever. Not healthy, but we're living in a world that's a little abnormal. It's not what your grandparents lived in, and not even what your parents lived in.
Okay, y'all. There you go. I mean, even these scientists know how important your melanin really is. These average keyboard Nazis, they don't know anything. They'll just sit there and tell you stupid mess like, what's the big deal about melanin? Because they're idiots, okay? But your more educated Caucasoid does know how important your melanin is. This is why they have spent a lifetime trying to achieve what you get naturally.
Started rolling. What is melanin and what is carbon? Tell us about those two minerals, or whatever they are.
Melanin is not a mineral.
Okay.
Melanin is a word that was used to describe a certain biological function. But that particular identification or category or thing, melanin, is a European identification of what they think activates those neurons in our body that makes us black. But when you break down our body, our biological structure, into what we would have to put it in, which is chemistry, biochemistry, melanin has no place. It's not to be found. What is found in the body that is attributed to melanin is carbon. Carbon not only determines the quality of life in black folks, carbon determines the quality of life in every living plant that exists that is natural. If carbon is absent, there's no life. Melanin, what is it? I don't know.
Why are white people trying to get some? It's a Greek word, melanos.
Well, white folks talk about protein. What is protein? They say one of the 19 amino acids, the building blocks of life. But I know for a fact that that is not a true statement. Because protein, if it was the building block of life, what happened to the gorilla that lives 180 years without eating anything that contains protein? Unless they're going to say that the plants contain protein too. They're always saying things, and because we have no laboratories to investigate those things, then we have to swallow it hook, line, and sinker. Miss Frances Welsing mentioned melanin. And I asked her, what is this thing? And I know she could not adequately answer the question because she was trained by someone European. So when you are trained by a European and told these things, you have to regurgitate these things. But no, they are completely in error. But how many brothers and sisters in America or anywhere in the world qualifies to offer a challenge when we have nothing to test that which we are given for validity? Strengthening that iron with carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. The CHO chain is the chain of life. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen.
Hey, it's Professor Dave. Let's talk about carbon.
He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave explains.
You may have heard that carbon is the element of life, but what does that mean? What determines whether an atom is of carbon in the first place? An atom consists of positively charged protons, neutrons, which have no charge, and negatively charged electrons. An element is defined by the number of protons in the nucleus. 1 proton is hydrogen, 2 is helium, 3 lithium, 4 beryllium, 5 boron, and 6 is carbon. The number of neutrons and electrons can change, but by definition, any atom with 6 protons is a carbon atom. How do they form? Hydrogen, the simplest and most abundant of all elements, accumulates into clumps due to gravity, which becomes stars. The tremendous inward pressure triggers nuclear fusion, which is when protons and neutrons smash together and fuse. Many elements, including carbon and larger ones like iron, are made in stars. Many elements, including carbon and larger ones like iron, are made in stars. Many elements, including carbon and larger ones like iron, are made in stars. Much larger ones need the immense energy of a supernova explosion or particle accelerators here on Earth. Much larger ones need the immense energy of a supernova explosion or particle accelerators here on Earth. Or particle accelerators here on Earth. Or particle accelerators here on Earth. So what's so special about carbon? Let's look at the electrons. Carbon atoms have 6. The first 2 are in the inner shell, and the other 4 are the so-called valence electrons. So it's the ability of carbon to bond in a wide variety of shapes with so many elements, including itself, that makes it so special. Also, carbon-carbon bonds are strong enough to be stable, but not so strong that they can't break and rearrange, which makes them excellent building blocks. When by itself, carbon has many allotropes, or ways an element can be arranged. There's the graphite in your pencil, which consists of slippery sheets of carbon that rub off easily. There's diamond, the hardest substance known, and we can even make interesting structures like nanotubes and fullerenes. That's just carbon by itself. When combined with hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and a few other elements, it makes all the diverse structures in your body, including carbohydrates, proteins, and DNA. We can take nature a step further and synthesize novel materials with an array of purposes. Putting carbons in the empty spots of an iron lattice makes it stronger. We call this steel, which is used in most of the large structures we know today. Teflon, a carbon-fluorine polymer, is a non-stick substance that's highly resistant to chemical degradation. And carbon-based synthetic drugs like inhibitors that can silence a faulty enzyme hold the prospect of curing so many diseases. That's a lot of reasons to love carbon. It really is the element of life. See you next time.
You're probably already familiar with some forms of carbon. For example, this graphite right over here. This is one form carbon takes, very important when you're writing with a pencil. Otherwise, you wouldn't see any writing if you didn't have the graphite scraping onto your paper. And your paper is also, it's not pure carbon, but it has a lot of carbon in it. This right over here is a raw diamond, another form that carbon can take under intense time, after a long period of time under intense pressure. But what you may or may not realize is that carbon is actually essential for life. In fact, life as we know it is carbon-based. So carbon-based life. When we look for signs of life, or at least life as we know it on other planets, we're looking for signs of carbon-based life. And there might be other forms, other elements that form the backbone of life, but carbon is the only one that we have been able to observe. Now, why is carbon so valuable for life? Why does it form the backbone of the molecules that make life possible? Well, it all comes down to where it sits in the periodic table and its atomic number and how it tends to bond with things. So this is why chemistry is important. So carbon we see over here has an atomic number of 6, which by definition means it has 6 protons. So if I were to draw its nucleus, it would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 protons. And the most common isotope of carbon on Earth is carbon-12, which also has 6 neutrons. So let me draw that in this nucleus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 neutrons. And then neutral carbon is going to have 6 electrons. And so 2 of them are going to be in their innermost, in the first shell. So that's 2 of them right over there. These are the inner shell, I guess you could say, so that's the first 2 electrons. And then you have 4 remaining in its outermost shell. Now, I'm claiming to you that it's the backbone of life, or life as we know it. And it's even the backbone of life as you are, life in the form of you. We've already talked about you being a majority water, and that's why if you look at the average human being, is going to be roughly, it depends on how well hydrated you are and your stage of development, the average human being is going to be 65% oxygen by mass. So you're 2/3 oxygen, and that's because of all of the water. Water is H2O, and oxygen forms the bulk of the mass of the water molecule. But in second place comes carbon. Carbon is approximately 18% of your body's mass. And this is because if you think about the non-fluid part, the non-liquid part of your body, there's a lot of carbon going on there. This right over here is a DNA molecule, and so these little gray areas, this is all carbon. This right over here is hexokinase. I'm not going to go into the details about what it does, but hexokinase is a protein, hexokinase, and the teal color that you see there, that is all carbon. And the teal color that you see there, that is all carbon. And the teal color that you see there, that is all carbon. That's all carbon. This right over here is glucose. It's very sweet. It's an important way to regulate your body's energy. And the teal color, that is carbon. This is ATP, often considered to be the molecular currency of energy in your body. And all the teal there, this is carbon. This is why a lot of, especially the non-water part of your body, is carbon. So hopefully this gives you a better appreciation for carbon. It's not just useful for pencils and diamonds, but even if you're just looking at your hand, you're looking at a lot of carbon.
The first subject I want to touch is black goo, and first time I heard of black goo was from you, and I remember last time we had no time to get into everything. So I watched some of your shows that are available out there, so I heard about the black goo, and I know that a lot of people have no idea, never heard a term, never heard of such thing. What is black goo? What is it?
The easiest way to grab it is like understanding how life is created on a planet. 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 This is, the research is coming from the lab. We did all this in the lab just by moving water enriched with carbon dioxide, seeing what happens inside the water. This is kind of transmutation research. Once you have the results in the lab, it is possible to understand what happens inside the earth. So now we go all the way how life is created. You have subduction from the oceans, where water sediments, water-rich sediments go into the lower areas of the planet, and this water rises up again. It's lighter than stone, so it's pressed up, and it's enriched with carbon dioxide from all the biological things that are subducted as well. So we have uprising carbon dioxide enriched water. And this goes through the stone in a under high pressure, high temperature, and with a lot of vortical motions. And you can imagine like the stone is opening, closing, you know, for all these veins of water rising up. So you have like Venturi valves. So you have compression, and then it releases, which is creating cavitation fields. This is exactly the setup we use in the lab for transmutation. And in the lab, what we can observe in the lab actually is that the water and the carbon dioxide is getting into very high molecular order with vortical flows with high speed. You have kind of charge separation in the water. And under these conditions, the molecules start to exchange atoms. So what you get is fulvic acid as the first basic brick of life, in a way. And this fulvic acid in this vortical motion is uniting to hydrocarbon chains. Okay. And this is all anorganic in a way. Now, what we discovered in the lab, which is not so easy to understand, that transmutation doesn't run in the table of elements, in the lines, but it runs in the rows. We transmute hydrogen to carbon to silica to gold. This is how it goes from the light elements to the heavy elements. Okay. It's just a scientific finding, you know. It's known since the 20s. Victor Schauberger was the first one to discover these lines of transmutation, to describe them, and by using his patterns and geometries and flow patterns, it's easy to reproduce the findings. So we have to deal with this. There's no way around it. This is how it happens.
So black goo is a matter found on Earth?
Yes. The earliest, we can find remains of all the process that kind of is leading to the creation of black goo. So if you look, for example, at mumio is found on the surface of stone in caves in the mountains. And this is kind of the early stage. It is rich in fulvic acids and has already some carbon chains. So this is kind of halfway to black goo. If you run these transmutation lines to the precious metals, then you create something that has all the physical properties to be able to carry a certain form of magnetism. Okay. So you create a liquid that has precious monoatomic precious metals embedded in a carbon environment. And this is the basic structure of life.
So it's alive. It's a matter that is alive.
In a way, yes. The monoatomic elements exchange light. They are photon attractors. Mm-hmm. So and these photon patterns are partly in an annihilated state. This goes into higher dimensional physics. So we have a 4D realm with this black goo inside, and we have everything that is needed to process consciousness. Yeah. You know, this bidirectional light is consciousness. And it comes out of the anorganic realm at that point. So what basically is created by upwhirling water is the physical matter with the ability to carry consciousness. It is still a baby in a way, with a zero experience. Then we have the black smokers in the ocean, where this liquid comes up and goes into the oceans. Geologists say that this is where life is created, in the biosphere. So this goes into solution in the water, and you have all the precious, the monoatomic gold soluted in seawater. You have the basic carbon pieces to build up life, and this is where life is created.
Sperm capacitation is collectively the process of sperm undergoing various physiological changes after being ejaculated from the testicles. This process occurs in the female reproductive tract for a selective period of time via uterine muscle contraction. The sperm cell undergoes various molecular changes to render it competent for oocyte fertilization. The ratio of cholesterol is a major determinant of capacitation. Removal of cholesterol leads to destabilizing of the sperm head plasma membrane. This increases the potential for fusion with the acrosomal membrane. This is removed in the female tract and is also a major step in capacitation. Spermatozoa undergo plasma membrane hyperpolarization. This causes an influx of bicarbonate and increases in CAMP metabolism. The increased bicarbonate stimulate adenyl cyclase, which in turn increases CAMP production. CAMP is a signaling molecule which acts on calcium. Calcium has a major role inside the sperm. There are 5 different channels expressed throughout the CAMP signaling pathway is stimulated by angiotensin II, A2. A2 receptor is AT1 and is found on the sperm head and all along the flagellum. A2 binds to AT1, causing an increased production in CAMP. The change in intracellular CAMP causes activation of pKa. The increase in CAMP production can lead to spontaneous acrosome reaction. The acrosome is a cap-like membrane that covers the anterior portion of the sperm head. The cap keeps sealed within itself the required enzymes used for penetration of the ovum. The cap keeps sealed within itself the required enzymes used for penetration of the ovum. The cap keeps sealed within itself the required enzymes used for penetration of the ovum. Hyperactivation is often considered as high-amplitude asymmetrical bending of the sperm flagella, resulting in a nonlinear trajectory including circular trajectories. Hyperactivated sperm have a greater propulsion. The hyperactive state gives sperm penetrative strength for crossing the cumulus matrix.
ahead and think for a moment about your very favorite food. What is it? Pizza, macaroni and cheese, chicken salad, sushi? Well, we all have different food preferences, but food is a source of large molecules that are needed for life called biomolecules. There are 4 major biomolecules that make up all of life, and this will be the focus of this video. So let's introduce the 4 biomolecules now and talk a little bit about their functions. We'll start with carbohydrates. Next one up is a diverse group known as lipids. Next, proteins. The last biomolecule is known as a nucleic acid. We just powered through introducing the 4 biomolecules. One last very important part to mention is the structure of these biomolecules. Understanding the structure can help with predicting their properties and easily being able to identify them. One thing I like to tell students to do is to write the 4 biomolecules in the same order that we went through: carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Then remember this mnemonic device that goes with these 4 biomolecules: cho, cho, chon, chomp. Instead of chomp at the end with an M, it's chomp at the end with an N. The C stands for carbon, the H stands for hydrogen, the O for oxygen. So carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids all have that cho in there.
You gotta come now. Oh, wait a minute, Steve. Tell us what happened. Well, I'm trying to tell you. Now, this thing had killed the doc. Well, what was it? Stop with it, kid. Well, it's kind of like a mass that keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Like a falling star from outer space.
Boy, that was close. Hey, come on. I want to see if I
No
can find
stopping the blob as it spreads from town to town.
Well, nearly every fire department in Oldham County was called to the scene of an asphalt fire this afternoon. Plumes of black smoke from the blaze could be seen for several miles.
Upon the dispatch, we had heavy black smoke showing. We knew at that point we had a well-involved fire.
And moments after that dispatch, the WLKY news chopper was on the scene capturing these pictures. A second alarm was hit, and area departments were called in with tanker trucks. The blaze was so intense it melted away the outside cover of this tank. Louisville Fire was asked for a foam truck.
When you have this much potential petroleum involved, any kind of diesel or asphalt products like this, foam is our #1 firefighting technique here. We want to make sure we get as much foam as possible.
Let's just start with programmable matter.
Shape-shifting material that can transform itself in real time, changing colors and shape on demand. It sounds like special effects you would see in a sci-fi movie, but this is no illusion. Researchers at Intel teamed up with the academic community to make what they call programmable matter.
The basic idea is the notion that you could have a material that could change its shape or change its physical properties just by reconfiguring itself.
Forget about designing something in flat 2 dimensions. What about creating a 3D prototype of anything, even a car?
Open the doors, kick the tires, peek inside to see what it looks like, fit little dolls of, people inside of it.
This space-age stuff is like putty in your hands. Programmable matter is still in the early developmental stages. But Intel's Andrew Chin says one day we may be able to morph objects on demand to fit our human needs.
So for example, I have a Bluetooth earpiece and it fits me great, but then when I put on my sunglasses, it doesn't fit anymore. Wouldn't it be nice if it could change its shape subtly, right, to all of a sudden match that? All of these things are possible with programmable matter.
Forget phone calls, forget video calls. I would be able to create a full three-dimensional Claytronic version of myself that could appear in front of you and give you a handshake or even a hug. The entertainment applications for this alone are astounding. Imagine playing a video game and the characters literally leap off the screen and become three-dimensional creatures in your home. And if this stuff becomes plentiful and cheap enough, we could have objects disassembling and reassembling themselves everywhere. Let's say I've got a bunch of friends coming over for dinner and I want to make sure I got enough seats for them. Well, I could use Claytronics to build the furniture right then and there. Then, when my guests leave, I could have it disassemble back into those individual catums and go into a vat for storage.
Programmable matter is already becoming a reality, and we've been shown this stuff in Hollywood movies forever. Yet another instance of predictive programming. So now let's move on to smart dust.
This powder-sized chip, and that's a salt crystal, so this is a small thing, is something called the Mu chip from Hitachi. It's the smallest commercially available RFID system in the world, and can be pulse-powered by radio waves. It doesn't require a battery. You can literally scatter this stuff like dust, or embed it into a sheet of paper. And you know what the really interesting thing about this technology is? This was commercially released 10 years ago. So, the inevitability of smart dust. So what is smart dust? Well, smart dust, of course, isn't a new concept. It originated with DARPA back in the 90s. And it's general purpose computing, sensors, wireless networking, all bundled up into millimeter scale sensor modes, drifting in the air currents, flecks of computing power settling on your skin, ingested, monitoring you inside and out.
But in the future, every square inch of every city will be alive with intelligence. Because every street and every building will have a network of microcomputers built right into them. Dr. Chris Piester calls it smart dust.
A smart dust particle, or mote, is a wireless sensor with sensing, computation, communication, and power in one package.
These all-in-one microcomputers will be small, very small.
The size of a mote today is about the size of a grain of rice. And we've shown that we can make the circuitry small enough and light enough that eventually it will be possible to make things that are on a sub-millimeter size scale.
Tiny specks of computer smart dust will form a vast invisible network that can help manage the infrastructure of even the largest city.
Smart cities in the future will take this low-power, inexpensive, small technology and basically distribute it everywhere.
These tiny computers record information about their surroundings, information they can send to other computers or to you. Smart dust on the tracks will monitor your commuter train so you know if it's running late. Potholes will be able to report themselves and warn your car, and you'll never have to wait for a radio traffic report again.
They're monitoring the flow of traffic and giving you alerts about what route is the right way to go to keep the traffic moving.
Bridges will get a coating of smart dust particles that can warn us when they detect stress fractures, helping avoid deadly collapses. But smart dust will also allow buildings and streets to recognize you and respond accordingly.
I think increasingly, the environment will respond to who we are and adapt in consequence.
The city will know where you are if you want it to.
Your workplace will know you. Smart dust at the entrance will boot up your computer. And smart dust embedded in the elevator doors will automatically ring your floor.
Smart dust is going to sense the environment and allow us to improve the way that we live our lives. Smart cities in the future will take this low-power, inexpensive, small technology and basically distribute it everywhere.
Potholes will be able to report themselves and warn your car, and you'll never have to wait for a radio traffic report again.
They're monitoring the flow of traffic and giving you alerts about what route is the right way to go to keep the traffic moving.
Potholes will be able to report themselves. Potholes will be able to report themselves. Potholes will be able to report themselves.
Asphalt cement is a byproduct of crude oil, the key ingredient they mix with crushed rocks and other minerals to make paving asphalt. So production begins at the paving plant's quarry, where some 15 meters below ground, workers driving heavy machinery collect boulders of granite that have been blasted off the rock walls. When it's time to make the asphalt, the rocks travel via conveyor belt from the storage area to a screening building to be classified by size. After this last crushing stage, the largest stones are 2 centimeters in size. Everything smaller than 5 millimeters goes in one pile. That includes stone dust created by the crushing process. Exactly what goes into the paving asphalt depends on what's being paved. But generally, these are the 4 ingredients. Sand, stone dust, 5 to 10 millimeter stone, and 10 to 14 millimeter stone. The ingredient proportions vary according to what the paving asphalt will be used for. The remainder, added later, will be liquid asphalt cement. Everything then goes into a mixer. As this demonstration shows, the mixer blends everything thoroughly. Then it's time to pump in hot asphalt cement. Oil refineries make asphalt cement from what's left over after they've processed crude oil. The paving mix contains about 5% asphalt cement. This is what happens inside the mixer. The hot asphalt cement binds the ingredients in about 30 seconds. The result is ready-to-lay paving asphalt. The mixer empties directly into trucks destined for the paving site. There, a paving machine will spread the hot asphalt on the road bed. Then, a compactor roller will pack it down. The asphalt cools and hardens in about...
Early next day, everyone was keen, rested, and in search of a new experience. Many times they had passed a sign to Engaddi, and they had since learned that it was a very important historical site. This area then became the next goal for the expedition. Whilst driving past the Dead Sea en route for Engaddi, many signs warning of open pits were noticed. This rang a bell with Simon, who remembered reading something about pits in this area. He asked Einar to stop, recalling Genesis 14. The king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, marched out and drew up their battle lines in the valley of Siddim. Could this be the valley of Siddim? It could very well be. The Bible says it happened by the Dead Sea, that is the Salt Sea, between the cities of the plain, and that's where they were standing at that moment. Finding another warning sign, they decided to discover what manner of pits the Bible referred to. Curiosity came to the fore. How big are they? How deep? How dangerous? They began to walk gingerly onward, keeping well clear of any soft-looking patches of ground. No one wanted to suddenly disappear. They came to a small ditch with a thin layer of shell over it. Things were getting interesting. This could obviously be a trap for the unwary. Nearby were larger pits, 2 to 3 feet deep, and Simon climbed a little way into one, noticing that the bottom appeared very dark in color. As they walked further on, another biblical verse sprang to mind. Genesis 14, verse 10. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountains. The group were surrounded by these pits, some huge and deep, and once again, the accuracy of the Bible amazed them. The bottom of these deeper pits could most definitely be described as slime. Looking behind them, the mountain stood, dark and brooding, and they that remained fled to the mountains. Obviously, the pits had been uncovered over thousands of years by the gradual evaporation of the Dead Sea, because traces of crystalline salt and other minerals could clearly be seen shining on the crusted edges.
The evidence from the ruins in Iraq, the ancient tablet descriptions, and the account of the tower's construction create a compelling case that the Tower of Babel was real. But how did the biblical story come about? For experts, the answer can be found by looking back to one of the most significant events in history. This is an original brick from Babylon. It carries traces of an unusual construction material from the time: bitumen, an ancient tar mortar that's specifically mentioned in the biblical tale.
Tucked in the corner of this case is something very interesting for people who are interested in the Tower of Babel, because this is one of the actual bricks. Down the edge you can see this murky black stuff. This is bitumen. In the book of Genesis, it literally says that they use brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. It's expressly said there. What we have here is one brick and its bitumen, which fits exactly into that special context.
All the evidence says the Tower of Babel was a real building, could it have been destroyed? Just as the Bible says.
Can you guys see how all this might tie together? They could very well be distributing smart dust and many other things into our system using chemtrails, sunblock, lotion, other hygiene products, medicine, and even food and drink. Is this part of an ongoing plan to turn human beings into walking receivers that are dumbed down by toxins and filled with heavy metals? Robot zombie citizens that can easily be tracked and identified as they travel through the smart cities? Are we in the process of a full-on gray goo takeover? Well, I think so.
Kasih